here. Pastor Johnson. Pastor Johnson, how are you?
Battlefield losses for his.
I am well. How are you, Santita?
I'm doing great. If you could just keep talking, I'm still trying to work some things out here.
Threat and warning to the west.
My last
is the day that the working, and we are exceedingly glad in it. Glad to be with you today. Know that it's going to be a great show.
Man.
As always.
And more modern than those of NATO countries. And when the territorial
just keep talking. Well, Henry has to let me know that he is up.
People, he says, we'll certainly use all the means at our disposal.
Glad to be here today.
Hey, it's wonderful to have you here.
Other places we could be, but we're glad to be here.
That's right.
I
Amen
don't
to
believe I
that.
can hear her right now.
You can hear her?
I don't.
Okay, hold on. Keep talking, Pastor.
Contrary to the UN's
Keep talking.
Oh, there we go. I hear her.
You can hear her now? Okay, very good.
Yes.
All right.
You, Santita, always happy to be with you.
Always a joy to be with you.
It is.
Strong headwinds, and neither President Xi nor President Putin are even showing up for this global gathering.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky will deliver a pre-recorded speech because of his continuing need to deal with Russia's invasion, making an exception to the General Assembly's requirement that all leaders speak in person. Federal Reserve Board is expected to raise its key short-term rate by a substantial 0.75 of a point for the third consecutive time. Another increase that large would boost its benchmark rate, which affects many consumer and business loans, to a range of 3% to 3.25%, highest level in 14 years. U.S. futures are up slightly. This is AP News.
Okay, so we are here.
West Virginia announces a multi-million-dollar opioid settlement.
The state of West Virginia has reached settlements with Walmart and CVS Pharmacy for a combined $147 million in a lawsuit over the company's role in the opioid crisis. West Virginia Attorney General Patrick Morrisey announced the settlements. Walmart agreed to a settlement of just over $65 million. CVS settled for $82.5 million, but the CVS deal includes a provision that West Virginia can receive money from any future national settlements concerning CVS. All told, West Virginia has reached $875 million in opioid settlements with manufacturers, wholesalers, and pharmacies. The settlement money will be distributed throughout the state to abate the opioid crisis. I'm Mike Rossio.
A man in his 70s is hospitalized after setting himself on fire near the Japanese Prime Minister's office in Tokyo in apparent protest.
Henry, let me know within 1 minute.
Former leader Shinzo Abe. I'm Tim McGuire.
When we're coming on, okay?
We'll do. We're about 2.5 away at this moment.
Thank you very much.
When we're closer.
Streaming worldwide at WCPT820.com. We are Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter. Now, your WCPT 820 Chicago traffic update.
Good morning. Let's start with some good news on I-55 northbound. There's just a little residual congestion between 126 and Weber. Overnight roadwork had caused major delays in this area just a short time ago. Now, again, it's just a little bit of slowing approaching Weber. Farther north, inbound Stevenson has building delays, Cicero to Kedzie. It's a 27-minute trip. Veterans Memorial Tollway to DeSable Lakeshore Drive. Outbound, it's 22 minutes. Going into O'Hare on westbound 190, traffic is slow. River Road to Manheim. On the Kennedy, downtown to the airport, it's 23 minutes. Inbound 19. The Eisenhower traffic has slowed now between 5th Avenue and Des Plaines Avenue. 28 minutes from 390 to downtown. That's traffic. I'm Jim Talamonte.
The Rick Smith Show, live weeknights from 8 to 10 p.m. Look at what's happening. The Rick Smith Show.
Okay, a bit longer than a minute right now.
Thank you.
Everyone is talking about it. Chicago's progressive talk.
This is a WCPT Veteran Minute. During the Civil War, 11% of the Confederate Army was made up of enslaved men forced to join. One of these men was Robert Smalls. Smalls was a deckhand on the Confederate supply ship known as the Planter. During his time, Smalls learned as much as he could about navigating the ship so he and others could escape. And on May 13th of 1862, while officers were sleeping, Smalls, along with 16 others, took the Planter out of the Charleston harbor, navigating through all 5 checkpoints while heading to open waters looking for the Union blockade. Smalls raised a white flag of surrender, having Union soldiers board the ship, giving them guns, ammo, and documents about planned Confederate attack. Getting a wealth of information, Smalls was given the role of the Union Navy captain. Stories like Smalls are one of the many factors convincing President Lincoln to allow free African Americans to serve in the Union Army. This has been a WCPT Veteran Minute.
And we're about to go.
You are
How much?
listening
What
to
does that mean?
WCPT 820.
We need to
And
go
you
right
just
now.
always say, give me seconds, okay?
Okay, we'll do.
We can change the world. We can change the world. Change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today on Wednesday, September 22nd. The UN opens. I'm getting some echo, so let's just work on that. Hey, Morning Stars on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube page, please, everybody like and share. Hey, Dave Dowling and Paula and Mark and Daryl and Vanderlei. Hey, and Joyce, sending you all much love today. Everybody like and share the show. Like and share the show. We're going to be talking about this. We've been talking about the Republicans, everybody, here on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. We've been looking at the Republican takeover of the states, the state legislatures, the governorships, the state legislatures, the upper and lower houses. And we've been saying to you that this is very, very important. Why is it important? Well, because that is where you get the districting so that you can get your federal representatives, the people you send to Washington. That all happens at your state capital. But now we're seeing another plan that is afoot. The Republicans are planning, and I don't generally do this partisan thing because I just think this is about power, and people use different parties as they will. The Democrats, the Dixiecrats, the Republicans, the Abolition Party. There it is. That having been said, Russ Feingold, the former senator out of the great state of Wisconsin, has warned that Republicans are now trying to have a constitutional convention. Because that comes from the states also. You can have 2/3 of Congress or 3/4 of the states. And the Republicans they are just very quietly, they're leading in Georgia. They are inclined to take most of the statewide seats. In Georgia, for example, we'll be looking at them. We'll be looking at this Herschel Walker, Raphael Warnock race, in which who has ever heard of a candidate trying to underplay their intelligence? Well, that's what Herschel Walker did yesterday. So let's talk about that, everybody. That's really important for us to look at this real plan. What would a constitutional convention look like in 2022, 2024, 2025, 26? And if it is controlled by the right wing, if it's not fought off by progressives, what will our Constitution look like? Think about that. I want you to call me at 773-763-9278. Remember, we're still trying to get slavery off the books in 2022. There are states that are carrying anti-slavery amendments, changing the language in their own constitutions. That's happening right now. Yeah, so we need to look at that. And we need to look at this Georgia race. What's happening with Stacey Abrams? What is her black male problem? What is going on with Raphael Warnock, who is a brilliant theologian, minister, preacher, orator? How is it that he is slightly poker, who many people say he speaks inelegantly. He has a really facile, very simple way of looking at things that some people would tease him for, but they don't. But I want to know what you think about that. He's not known for being incredibly bright. So it's something that we need to think about. Although you can't really be an unintelligent athlete. There's too much that you have to learn about plays and things like that. That having been said, he has never come across as this towering intellectual, and he's never certainly come across as someone that you want to talk policy with, or with whom you want to talk policy. No, you don't have that, not at all. So how is it? What's going on? And is it that the majority of Georgia would feel comfortable with a black man who could be manipulated, with a black man who they could laugh at. You know me, Santita puts it right where it is. So I want to know what you think is going on here. But we got a lot to talk about in Legal Q&A with CK. So let's get to some of these headlines so we can get some good news in Chicago. A high of 79 degrees, partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, I think the fall is setting in, everybody. 67 degrees, mostly cloudy in Major League Baseball as we head into October. Remember back in the day with Reggie Jackson, Mr. October? He would show up and show out during October during the playoff and World Series seasons. Well, now the Guardians 10, the White Sox 7, the Cubs 2, the Marlins 1, and the Twins had the night off. Guess what, everybody? The number of ultra rich has hit an all-time high as someone dies from hunger every 4 seconds. A coalition of charities asserted that, in their new analysis, that the global ranks of the super rich soared to a record number. This coalition said yesterday that hundreds of millions of people around the world are hungry, food insecure, as we put it euphemistically. And that outcome, and that someone starves to death every 4 seconds as the ranks of the ultra rich have swelled. What do you think about that? At least 238 international and local charities from 75 countries signed an open letter noting that, quote, a staggering 345 million people are now experiencing acute hunger, a number that has more than doubled since 2019. What do you think about that? This letter has been timed to coincide with the opening of the General Assembly of the United Nations in New York. I wonder if that will be addressed. Should it be addressed? Call me at 773-763-9278. Indeed, just 2 weeks of food billionaire wealth gains could fund anti-hunger effort. But what about the Queen of England? That's why we've been talking about her, Chaparral, because this is a family that is worth trillions of dollars, the largest landowning family on earth. What would they have? And we're not even counting their jewels. That's just the value of the land. The land that they own and control is worth $33 trillion at least. So let's talk about that, everybody. Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced the immediate, quote, partial mobilization, close quote, of Russian citizens in an escalation of Moscow's offensive in Ukraine and pledged to use, quote, all means, close quote, to defend the country and its people. The mobilization would mean Russian citizens who are in the reserve and those with military experience could be enlisted to serve in the country's army. According to Russian officials, about 300,000 reservists will be called up as part of the mobilization. Hurricane Fiona has escalated into a Category 4 storm and is continuing along its catastrophic path northward today. Most of Puerto Rico is still without power. Now, Puerto Rico is the United States. These are American citizens. They are still without power, which goes to infrastructure, everybody. We need to think about Puerto Rico, Turks and Caicos, and the Dominican Republic now face a prolonged recovery process after devastating flooding and raging winds. And this, as they commemorate the anniversary of Hurricane Maria, the most devastating hurricane to hit our brothers and sisters down in Puerto Rico, but they also wreaked havoc upon the United States Virgin Islands, which we never talk about, everybody. Wow. Migrants flown to Martha's Vineyard sue Governor DeSantis over a fraudulent scheme. That's right. Lawyers representing Venezuelan migrants, according to this report from Common Sense, who were recently flown to Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts on orders from Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis, filed a class action lawsuit on Tuesday alleging the Republican and his state's transportation secretary perpetrated a, quote, fraudulent and discriminatory scheme against them. Defendants, they said, quote, manipulated them, stripped them of their dignity, deprived them of their liberty, bodily autonomy, due process, and equal protection under the law. And they were also presented information that was essentially a lie, that they were going to get jobs and they were going to get this and that. And of course, they got to Martha's Vineyard and they were literally dumped there. The first hearing with the Mar-a-Lago search special master took place on Tuesday as former President Trump's team continues to signal resistance to making certain disclosures about any moves to declassify the seized documents in question. Judge Raymond Deary, a senior judge who has a job of reviewing the approximately 11,000 documents taken from Trump's Florida home, showed skepticism of former President Trump's arguments about how the review should proceed and stressed a desire to move quickly in order to finish his review by the end of November. The FDA, is warning about a rise in adolescents and young adults participating in dangerous social media challenges. Everybody, watch out for your children. One recent challenge posted on social media encouraged people to cook chicken, get this, in NyQuil, and similar over-the-counter cough and cold medicines. Boiling a medication, according to the FDA, can make it much more concentrated and change its properties in other ways. It's very dangerous practice, everybody. A very, very dangerous practice. Please be very careful. Let's look out for what's happening at the UN. President Biden will be speaking there today. In the meantime, the UN chief, the head of the UN, blasts the PR industry for spearheading big oil's propaganda machine. And Lula, that's right, the former president of Brazil, who the establishment has tried to imprison, but he is the people's champion. He, with less than 2 weeks remaining before the first round of Brazil's presidential elections, he is up 16 points, according to polling data, over President Bolsonaro. His lead is growing, and I'm glad to know that he's part of this wind of progressive change sweeping through South America. We have got the brilliant and the lovely and the gifted, as a preacher and as a psalmist, Pastor Vicki Johnson. It's always a joy to hear your voice. Of course, she is at 80th and Jeffrey here in Chicago at the St. Thomas Lutheran Church. You can check them out on Facebook, and you can also go there in person. Thank goodness. But as we go there in person, just very quickly, if you don't mask, you don't reject people, you put them in another section, right? And then you proceed with the service, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's always good to hear your voice too, Santita.
Wonderful.
Yes, as we are continuing to worship, it was very disturbing for me to hear the president on 60 Minutes Sunday saying that the pandemic is over. And we all know, and especially in our community, that it is not. And so we are yet
bad signals. But you know what they're doing, I think, Pastor Johnson? They're signaling that they're done with the pandemic. If you notice, they closed the, or should I say, they shortened your incubation period. And they want people to go back to work, and they want America to get back in the groove in terms of business. And, quite frankly, there is no care for people's care, because there's more than COVID out here. I've continued to tell you all that COVID is highly survivable, but people need treatment. Initially, people couldn't even get tested, particularly in the Black and brown communities. That's what happened.
Yes.
That's a very large part of that story that no one wants to talk about, and we should. Because my friends in wealthy white areas were able to get tested constantly at the beginning of 2020. If they felt a little cough or a little tickle, they were able to go down the street and get tested. Black people and brown people who worked on the front lines could not get a test, and they were working in the hospitals. Shame, shame, shame. And they certainly couldn't get any treatment. So
yes. And it's obvious that they are done with it, because even as you walk into grocery stores where they used to have the stations where you could sanitize your hands and get a cloth to wipe off your cart, now the hand sanitizers are empty. There is no cloth to wipe off your cart. So they are through with it. But I thank God for Dr. Shanina, because we are still in it, and we should do more sanitizing. I heard her saying that. We've just got to keep it up. And so I'm thinking about making sure that, maybe even hand out little private hand sanitizers, so that people can really be conscious to be aware that the pandemic is still here, especially for us.
Yes, not just the pandemic is endemic. It's here. But it's here.
Yes.
It's here.
Yes.
And I was talking with someone yesterday, and he was saying, well, it is over. I said, it's not over. I said, the establishment is now over you being home for a week. Now you're not going to get paid sick leave in many instances. It's awful. It's just awful. And people, you know what? We're the ones who allow this to go on. We're the ones. So, when we decide that we've had enough of being treated or mistreated, shall I say, things will change. But things will only change when you push the envelope. Pastor Vicki Johnson, on that note, I need some good news.
Well, good morning, Santita, and good morning to all of your morning stars and friends. There is good news. While watching one of the many football games this weekend, I saw a commercial where young high school football players were studying the plays of the GOAT, Tom Brady, so that they could be him. They practiced throwing the ball with precision. They practiced scrambling to get away from those who would sack them. And they practiced learning how to buy time. Young athletes, as well as people, regular people, did the same thing in the 20th century when everyone wanted to be like Mike. Michael Jordan, the GOAT of basketball. If kids couldn't fly like him, at least they could wear his shoes. And not only did they wear them, but adults who were not athletes at all wore them too. In this particular commercial, while the kids were giving it their best to be like the GOAT Tom Brady, someone said, "You will never be Tom Brady. You will never be Tom Brady." I thought that was cruel. How dare they dampen the dreams of the young as they aspire for greatness? How dare them railroad them away from their dreams? I didn't like it, and I was ready to turn the game off until I heard Brady say, "You will never be Tom Brady. You can only be you." Then the commercial went on to say that you can, the you that you are today is not the you that you shall become. When I heard that, I reversed and I was about ready to shout because it is so true. The you that you are today is not the you that you shall become. If you continue working hard, if you continue giving it your best, if you continue studying greatness in whatever area it is, and we can glean even outside of our areas because there is a principle that is applied to greatness. Too often we spend our lives trying to be someone else when all we can really be is who we are. Being you really is good enough. Be the best you that you can be, and that will be good enough. Do it for yourself, and that's good enough. If you will be your best, and I believe that you will, then to me, that's good news.
Amen, 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 amen. Sending you much love today. Henry, I want to know who the caller is, so let me please send me that text. But that's very important for us to know, that really, so much time. And I can see that at one point I tried to do that in my life. I wanted to do what I would say ultimately, I think what my mother really wanted me to be. I'm going to go, I'll be a physician. I'll do this. I'll do that. And it was just not me. And you can't be someone else's version of yourself. And that's something I learned from my father. Now, my father would never contradict her ever. But he said, honey, you have to follow your passions in life, which is what he did, which ultimately is what she did. But I can understand her wanting, at that time, 30, 40 years ago, going into medicine was a more secure financial path, right? And if you have the aptitude for it, why not do it? But I never had the passion for it.
Right.
But not to mention the fact that Dr. Vincent Rue, who was the medical director at Howard University Hospital, his daughter and I did an engineering program before I went to college at Carnegie Mellon University. I'll never forget Bridget. She's a big engineer now. And he said, honey, do you want to be a physician? I said, I think I could do some good things. He said, let me tell you something. The money is out of this thing. So if there's something else you could figure out, you do that. Because medicine, and this was 1985. He said, medicine is about to completely change. Completely. The way we deliver it and whom we deliver it to. He said, that's why we have to fight to keep Howard open. Because we serve the underserved, the people who are overlooked. But he said, but honey, in about 30 or 40 years, it's not going to be good. Dr. Vincent Rue. God bless him. And did he not tell the truth?
That was a prophetic statement.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's why the King Drew Hospital, which serves Black people primarily in L.A., Howard University Hospital in D.C., and Grady in Atlanta. Oh, I know them. And, Provident Hospital here in Cook County, Stroger. That's why they're so important. And, and we have to fight to make our county hospitals, our public hospitals, as fortified as the Northwesterns are. But, I went to Northwestern because both my parents were there a couple of weeks ago. And, I see them kind of struggling financially. And, and the fact is, we have 330 million people in the United States. We barely have 1 million beds in hospital beds. That's crazy. Vicki, that's Pastor Vicki. That's crazy. I mean, how do you do that?
Yes, it is.
In the United States. So, you know what? But let me bring up this caller very quickly. This caller wants to talk about slavery real quick. Dave, how you Dynamo Dave? How you doing, sweetie?
Hey, good. How's our sunshine sisters of Chicago doing today?
Sunshine sister, I love you, Dave. Cuckoo-ca-choo. I love you, Dynamo Dave.
Thank you. So, two things. One, you mentioned how much the Queen or whatever that monarchy or whatever it is called in England owns, trillions or whatever property. Mm-hmm. And as you well know, that's all property that was stolen from indigenous people of those areas, those geographic things. Anyway, just want to remind people of that, so not to glamorize their wealth. The other thing, listening to our brother Tom Hartman, he always says that slavery is still legal in their Constitution, and he says that is when once incarcerated, that they can force you to do things while you're incarcerated as far as work goes. And so, although they abolished they abolished slavery in the quote outside of incarceration, but inside incarceration, according to Mr. Hartman, it's still legal.
Well, I can tell you, according to the Pew Charitable Foundation that gives us these wonderful studies and these wonderful polls, just in Alabama, Louisiana, and Oregon, I think in Tennessee and Vermont, it's 5 states that will decide on state constitutional amendments prohibiting slavery and involuntary servitude. And that is this year. That's this year. I mean, it's just Dynamo Dave. Your sunshine sister is telling you this is crazy. But I'm glad that it's on the books. I mean, what do you think is going to happen? I've got 1 minute and it belongs to you.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I just know this, and then and your fine listeners know that the incarceration of Black and brown people is at a much higher rate than non, and that when it comes to people getting shot, obviously, they don't shoot guys that break into a Capitol, but they shoot people who just are fleeing out of terror because they don't want to be locked up.
But you know what? Eventually, stay with me during the break because I've got to make a hard out to the break. But stay right here. Let's talk for a minute during the break. But that's, the thing is, we're the canaries in the mine, Black and brown people, and especially Black people. The thing is, what happens to me eventually is going to happen to you. And if we can grow up in our politics and embrace that, boy, we'd get along and we'd be much further along. Back in just a minute on the Santita Jackson Show. Yeah, sweetie. How you think, Dynamo Dave? I just think you are precious. you got me this morning.
You are too. I'm so glad you host your show. It's uplifting to me. Your guests like Vicky, I always love listening to those people that you have on to help us, navigate the world as far as boosting our spirits. So thank you. You've got a very unique show, and I just love it.
Oh, I just love you. Where are you, Dave?
So I live in Minneapolis. Have you been to Minneapolis?
Yes.
So yours are, it's like some lakes, one that's been renamed Biddy McCoska, and a place called Lake Ross. I'm like a block away from most. I'm in a neighborhood called the Uptown Minneapolis. But yes, but I grew up in the western suburb of Minneapolis, and I had no idea until after that unfortunate man got killed by the police, George Floyd, that I had no idea the way we funded schools. I happened to grow up in an area where there was a lot of industry. Honeywell was located there. This is Hopkins. There was the large, more grocery stores, companies were located there. Their headquarters were located there than any other place in the U.S. For whatever reason, a confluence of railroad tracks or something. And and then my dad worked for Farmhand, which was the John Deere of Minnesota. Now they're no longer around. But anyway, but I didn't know that all these industries, they were taxing them, and that was funding the school system there. I had no idea that was what was going on until later on. I thought, because like in the North Minneapolis area, they only teach these kids, they've taken away the kind of classes I had growing up. They don't have art anymore. They don't have, auto mechanics. But they just have the basics, reading, writing, and arithmetic. And then they tell these kids if they can't get it, and as well as I, some people, you got your right brain and left brain. Some of the stuff is left brain learning, some is right. And these kids are creative, but they're told they're dunces or whatever. They use probably a worse term than that. And then they get a complex, and some of them are coming from broken homes. And it's like, I think we should have a national funding thing. We should be funding our schools at the level we're funding the freaking Pentagon.
And more.
And more. Because we do have an educational crisis in this nation. We had really, very intelligent people, but there's a movement of to try to keep you and I, people of different colors, be arguing and stuff over petty things. You know what I mean? As opposed to what really matters. And when they poll people,
Hi, Miss Jackson. Just letting you know we have about a minute left, and I have just about everyone called up except for Robert Patillo, but I'll be grabbing him once we
get into the show. Very good.
We can have free education. If we just cut that Pentagon, stop buying them F-35 bombers or whatever they're called nowadays, we could have a free transportation system across America. You'd never even have to pay a dime to even get on a plane. If we had the will and if we could take things back, as it were.
But I think that we can. We just have to have the will to do that. It's going to be a heavy lift, but we can do that.
30 seconds.
Thank you. But, Dynamo Dave, I'm going to have to let you go, my sweet, but I want to thank you. Dave, stay in touch, would you please?
Yeah, I'll do that. Hey,
just very quick, sweetie, I'm about to come back up.
Oh, I'll let you go.
No. What's your group?
Can I talk to your producer? Is there like an email?
Well, I'm my producer.
I'm
the producer. Let me give you this email very quickly. It's S. Jackson.
Okay.
Oh, stay right there, Dave.
Change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Talking to our AM 950 radio listener up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Dave. And I just want to send you, Dynamo Dave, excuse me, so much love. Send me, reach out to me on Facebook on Santita Jackson and Friends. You can always do that, Dave. But you can also, and you can send me a direct message there. All right? Dave, you still there, sweetie?
Yep.
Okay. I'll give everyone
Facebook because they're
No, let me give you this email address. This is my email address at WCPT. It's sjackson secret at WCPT820.com.
Very well. Thank
Okay.
you for sharing that.
Of course.
With me and the listeners.
Well, you know what? And tell
for
more
having me
people
on.
about us, Dave. You're so sweet.
Thank you, and you are as well. So thanks for doing the show.
I
Thanks
love
for-
my Dave. Thank you,
You're the producer of
Dynamo
your own
Dave.
show. You're an all-star.
You're
Anyway.
very sweet. Thank you so much, Dave. Sending you much love. Everybody.
You make your magnificent, okay?
Thank you. You have a magnificent weekend day. Everybody, I want you to call me at 773-763-9278. What about a U.S. Constitutional Convention? You might say, it could never happen. Well, some people said President Trump could never happen, and here we are. Some people never would have thought that we would have had the Brooks Brothers riots. I keep reminding you in 2001, where you had these well-dressed Republicans who were banging on the windows and harassing people so that they would not finish counting the vote, which Al Gore ultimately won. But then we got President Bush. A lot of crazy things happened. Lots and lots and lots of crazy things. But it's not that crazy. I mean, the brilliance of our Constitution is that they left space. I've talked with my brother, former Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. about this, and his book, A More Perfect Union, co-authored by now the late Frank Watkins. A More Perfect Union. Please get that book, Advancing New American Rights. They left space in the Constitution, the Founding Fathers, for it to be amended. They said, we're writing this in the 1770s, ratifying it in 1789, but times are going to change. 1789, they had enough foresight to know that 1889 was going to be different, 1989 and beyond. So what about a right-wing plot to rewrite the U.S. Constitution? Well, Russ Feingold, the former senator out of Wisconsin, has said, you all, this could very well happen. This could very well happen. You are watching very, very quietly and, and very efficiently. Republicans are taking over the state legislatures all across the country. Remember, under the Obama administration, we lost more than 1,000 seats from coast to coast. And we lost control of the legislatures. And that is very dangerous because it takes 2/3 of Congress to call a constitutional convention, and 3/4 of the states. We're about there with the Republicans. And, I have to be honest with you, Republican, Democrat, my thing is, where do you stand on issues and where do you stand in terms of principle? What would this new Constitution look like? What do you want to change? I mean, and I say that in this context, this is the background. We have got 5 states that will decide on state amendments this year, in a few weeks, within 50 days, on whether or not to prohibit slavery and involuntary servitude. It's going to be a vote, and it's not going to be unanimous. It's not going to be a unanimous decision. So what does that mean? What does that mean as we're watching progressives gerrymandered out of power? What does it mean? Well, I said, well, okay, we have legal Q&A with C.K. Hoffler. That begins in about 30 minutes, but I had to pull her early. Of course, she's going to be on Court TV and WAOK every Tuesday. And, of course, she is here every Wednesday. We've got the executive director of the National Council of Negro Women, really our oldest and most prestigious Black civil rights and advocacy organization. And Mary McLeod Bethune, the great Mary McLeod Bethune, was the founder. And I am so glad to have you all here today because I want to know, let me start with you, Janice. Because I have to go to these Southerners, CK, because they kind of look at the Constitution and America just a little differently, maybe because y'all were breakaway people. I don't know. And there's still a fight that's ongoing. Does a constitutional convention, given, do you think that this has been part of the Republican plan, Attorney Mathis?
There is a book that is a favorite of mine. Good morning, Santita.
Good morning.
And CK, thanks for having me on. Called Democracy in Chains. And it outlines how, beginning in the 1950s, Southerners and others started to think about how to remodel the Constitution to preserve what they saw as their eroding power in the government. And so, yeah, I think the plot is real. And I don't know if it's a plot, it's been a plan to, if the Constitution is no longer working for you, if these rising black and brown hordes of voters, if there's Roe versus Wade, if there's rights for gay folks, if states' rights are in decline, if we're putting, talking about the right to health care and the right to education, like Frank and Congressman Jesse Jackson did in brilliant book. Yes, there is a discussion to be had about the Constitution, but who controls that discussion, and when is the right time to have it? I think are questions that we need to ask. Now is probably not the right time, as you pointed out, because the control of the state legislatures, and more likely than not, at least one house of the United States Congress, is in the hands of those who would further restrict rights and not expand them. We ought to have a conversation about health care and what are the limits of the Second Amendment. And we ought to have a discussion about codifying Roe versus Wade and even the Equal Rights Amendment, reconfiguring the Supreme Court. There are a lot of reasons to talk about the failures, what Russ Feingold brilliantly calls the failures of the Constitution. But is this the right time? Is this the right environment to do that?
Attorney C.K. Hoffler. It seems like this is crazy. I'm going to get to Chaparral at the top of the hour. Didn't know you were there, Chaparral. It seems crazy, but, or should I say not crazy, but far-fetched, because I don't want to make it crazy because, you know, you had to amend the Constitution to make us free. So I don't have a problem with that. And you almost had a constitutional convention over that. Well, we had a civil war, but it just doesn't seem that far-fetched now, because I always got the sense that the right wing are not just fighting some proxy fight. There's something else going on here. There's some other issues, whether I agree with them or not. I mean, when you have debates with them, they pull up the Constitution, they pull up the founding documents. They are a very studied opposition. CK.
Well, Santita, good morning. Good morning to everyone. To my friend Jan, it's so great to hear your voice. You know, it's not so far-fetched. I would use the word crazy. And the reason why it's not so far-fetched is because you have to look at the analysis that was used in the overturning of Roe versus Wade. So, for one, we know, as Janice has said, this has been part of an agenda. There are books published about it, but they've been executing this plan for a very long time. This is not a new concept for conservatives, for right-wing Republicans. But because of the political climate, we're such a divided country, because of the events, certain events, including what happened on January 6th, because of what's happening right now with former President Trump, you know, the legal challenges that he has and that are progressing through the court are mobilizing a base, are mobilizing those who would support constitutional challenges, because right now, most of the power is being vested in the states. If you look at the overturning of Roe versus Wade, what that is saying is the states, you decide. So it was part of a plan to take over the legislature so that when the states decided, they would decide in favor of very, very, very conservative moves, conservative values. And that's what's happening. So this is not far-fetched. I do think it would be crazy based on what you're currently hearing would be on the agenda, but I think it's coming. So I always believe we need to prepare ourselves for what is coming. This country is in a place where, believe it or not, I think many people would embrace the constitutional amendment. First of all, for this kind of conference, and by the way, people don't even know what it means. They don't know what it is. They haven't thought about it. They don't think it matters. And so when we talk about it, we're talking about it in the context of a great deal of lack of knowledge and direction on what it could mean, what it would mean. And because of the climate in this country, I think it's likely to happen sooner rather than later.
And see, because we don't know, CK, that's what concerns me. You know, because other people are being very, very deliberate and they are very studied, CK. You know, that was one of the things that I learned from Reverend. You know, one day I told you I could always tell that he wanted to talk to me because he would, and Janice has known my father all of her life. He would and he had security when I was growing up. You know, he would drive me to Whitney Young, my high school, without anyone in the car, which always frightened me to death because I was always afraid for him. And I was like, I don't want my father to be by himself, but he wanted to speak to me alone. And I wanted to get to school by about 6:15 or 6:30 because I could have breakfast and, you know, I could study. And I just like to get a jump on my day because I always had early classes. And as we were driving downtown, he said, "Baby, do you notice anything?" I said, no. I mean, it's early. We're here. He said, "Baby, look at the tops of all of these buildings, you know, that made up the skyline." He said, "The lights are on at the top." He said, "I'm meeting with the chairman of the board of Standard Oil of Indiana, and we have a 6:30 meeting. And the reason we're having a 6:30 meeting is because that is the only time in his day and mine when we have time." He said, "But be very clear. The people who run the world get up before everybody and go to bed after everybody. And they're always thinking they're miles ahead. Remember, you need to be miles ahead." They think generationally. And and they think in 100-year periods, CK and Janice. They don't just think from sunrise to sunset. And, you know, that's why when I saw Russ Feingold, I said, whoa, hold on. This could happen. CK, you just said it. It could happen. Like, this could happen. And, you know, I would want to know what would be the issues that they want to discuss while we're voting on slavery in 2022. Robert Patillo, are you there?
I'm here.
What do you think? Is this idea too far-fetched? I mean, CK said, you know, hey, this could happen, and it could happen sooner rather than later.
It's not a could. They are absolutely planning for this. So the good thing is they don't keep it a secret. They have websites. They have conventions about it. They talk about having a convention of the states to rewrite the Constitution to be closer to what the founders envisioned. We talked about this previously, that they want to go back to the Articles of Confederation in large part, to take power away from the federal government, which they feel has become too powerful, has become an empire, has basically become the same British Empire that they were fighting against, and they want to return the power to state and local governments, creating a more humble nation. Now, why you will look at the most powerful nation on earth and say this isn't working is beyond most of us, but it's a growing movement that has happened, particularly since the beginning of the civil rights movement, when they felt that the progress made during the New Deal, the programs that acted to reset American society, took us away from those traditional American values. This is why that concept of "Make America Great Again" was so powerful for many people, because it harnesses kind of that same conceptualization of returning to this unspecific moment in time when America was just great and wonderful and exceptional, and women had to stay in the kitchen, and blacks knew their place, and the Mexicans were down on the other side of the border, and they were just here to do some cleaning and picking and those sorts of things. They want to return to that version of America. And it's a very strong and compelling point when it comes to American politics. What they've learned how to do is simply turn into a dog whistle. Talk about conservative conservatism, talk about the grand old party, talk about all this backward facing concepts, as opposed to progress and moving forward and changing things. As somebody once said, it's hard to be a conservative when you don't have anything that you want to conserve. But that's what these folks want. They want to conserve the time when America was a land of large planters, where the wealthy white landowners made all the rules and everybody else kind of got in line with them. So not as if they keep these things a secret. They make it very clear that this is their goal when it comes to almost every policy of the U.S. government. And it's very strange that people who are in charge of society are so unhappy with the way the society is, but it's because they see what is coming around the corner. They see the quote-unquote singularity coming that was at one point in time predicted for 2044, but now it's moved up to 2036, where America will become a majority-minority nation, where white people will no longer be the majority of the American population. And that's why they try to curtail illegal immigration, because they don't like the browning of America. This is why they push for mass incarceration, to get as many black and brown people in jail so they're not out here reproducing. This is why they are against women's reproductive rights. They need their women not in the workforce. They need them at home being brood mares, popping out 10, 12 kids again and dying in childbirth. This is their goal for America, to return to that antebellum Victoria age, and to scare all of us who weren't part of that American society. That's what they want to return to.
Well, it's just, did that America ever exist, Janice? Most Americans were not wealthy. I mean, what could be on the table in a constitutional convention? Would slavery be on the table? We're voting on it today, Janice. Well, CK, what about you?
Can you hear me?
Oh, no,
Go
now
ahead,
I can.
CK.
Okay. I mean, what would be on the table? I mean, because unbelievably,
might have
slavery's
the,
on the table today in 5 states.
I would expect Second Amendment, strengthening the Second Amendment to make the right to own guns and carry guns of every sort, every type, every place, everywhere, all the time. That would be a balanced budget amendment, so you're tied of federal government's hands. No more infrastructure bills, no more investments in people. It would all be about the military. I mean, some people think that the only legitimate purpose of the government is defense and building roads, and that's what we would return to. You wouldn't have human investments. You wouldn't have investments in education. It would be all about a muscular military and muscular police force to keep the people in line. The sentiment seems to be that we've achieved too much democracy. Now, I personally think that we've not achieved enough. We've not protected the right to vote, but some people still believe that we should not, just as Robert said, that you got too much participation, and that these women and blacks and immigrants and gays need to just calm down and let the folk who know how to run the country do that, which is basically wealthy white men. Even those who are not wealthy white women, we've seen some 53% of white women vote candidates that likely don't have their best interests at heart, pack the Supreme Court. So it is entirely plausible to me, and this is not a new idea.
But it just seems...
I agree with Robert that it's all about changing the changing demographics of the country.
But I think it's not a new idea. But CK, it seems like it's right here, right at our fingertips. And what is disturbing to me is that we're not paying attention. Russ Feingold, thankfully, is paying attention. But we're not paying attention. Losing 1,000 seats during the Obama years was so dangerous. And we've not regained ground. And now we're watching, oh my gosh, what is happening in Georgia is like, we're watching the Senate race tighten in Pennsylvania. This is a lot, CK.
Santita, it is a lot. It is a lot. But it's based on a playbook. I don't think there's nothing new about it. What's new and what's shocking is that we don't have our eye on the prize. That we're not paying attention to it. And I just want people to remember, if we go back to the concept and the thought process of the framers of the Constitution, Black people were not human beings then. We were considered chattels. So just remember that. There were no gay rights. There were no rights for women. Individual rights didn't exist. So this is why that, again, people need to read Justice Alito's opinion when he overturned Roe versus Wade, and then read Clarence Thomas's opinion in what he said, because that will tell you where, in my impression, where the country is going and where this convention would go. It's in print. We know the issues, but I just want to remind people who might seem to be confused about what's going on, that if you go back, all these people who are saying that we need to go back and amend the Constitution to reflect A, B, C, and how the framers envisioned it. Well, the framers didn't envision Black and brown people being in power on any level because they were not human beings. They didn't envision women voting. They didn't envision women having any right, Roe versus Wade, over their body, the reversal of Roe versus Wade. So this is going to continue. LGBTQ plus community didn't exist in a way that people could understand or even know. So that, all of the rights surrounding the LGBTQ plus community, those would go out of the window. And the privacy out the window. So I think that we have to be very, very careful. Very careful. Some of these issues are not partisan issues. They have to do with individual rights. So if we're going to go back to the framers of the Constitution, forget having any freedom in this country, the kind of freedoms that we are enjoying now. I mean, there might be a restriction on who can own property. We couldn't own property. If you're not an individual, you can't own property. If you're not a human being. So women wouldn't be able to own property. Their husbands would have to own the property. So all of these things, it's even difficult for me to articulate that these are some of the things that would be on the agenda. But this is where we are. And I just think we need to wake up and smell the coffee.
Well, first of all, we need to know that it's happening, right? Because we don't know that it's happening. That's why when I saw this, I said, well, this jumped out at me. And I reached out to you, and I reached out to Janice, I reached out to Robert Patillo. Because I said, I think that, we need to, everyone, you need to pass the word. We need to understand that a constitutional convention, I think it's going to happen. What will be on the table? And will you have a seat at that table, or will you be on the menu? Now, that's the key. That's the question. So think about that, everybody. Let's talk about what's happening in Georgia. Who would have thunk it? Well, we would have thunk it. What's happening in Georgia? What's happening with the Herschel Walker, Raphael Warnock race? Senator Warnock is really fighting to hold on to his seat. And Herschel Walker is gaining, even as they go into their one debate. They only have one debate scheduled thus far. And he's lowering expectations, and it's amazing. I've never heard a candidate, in all seriousness, not mind being regarded as someone who's not very bright. What does that mean? And what does that say about the people of Georgia who support him? Is it easier to support a Black man or to have a Black man represent you who's not a threat? Because he's not a threat. Intellectually, he's not a threat. He's not a threat in any particular way. And someone who's smart and someone who has their own, who owns themselves, should not be a threat to anyone. But apparently they are, which is why we're watching the dumbing down of America. We're watching the collapsing of our public school system. Because, an educated citizenry is tough to control. Think about that. That's why you have to fight to be free. And that's not just a Black thing. Black people showed you what it's like to be in shackles. And now you need to understand that it could be you. It always has been the case. It has always been thus. Let's talk about Stacey Abrams. She said, if Black men vote for me, I will win. Is it all on Black men? What's happening in that campaign? Boy, oh boy, she could still pull it out, but what's it going to take? What is going on in Georgia? Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show. I want you to call me at 773-763-9278. And please go to Rainbow Push and drop off some water at 930 East 50th Street. We are taking water by the truckload, hopefully by the truckloads, down to Jackson, Mississippi. Even though they do have water that passes a smell test, if you will, that's coming through the faucets, people need water down there. It's going to take a while for that to get right. Things are still not right up in Flint. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show, the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. All right, beautiful people, how you doing today? Ooh. What's going on down there in Georgia? Girl, you got a whole lot going on down there. Ooh. Ooh.
Well, I tell you, you got the right one on it. I'm almost not recognizing, well, in my lifetime, recognizing Georgia. You know, it's even from, I've only been here a decade. I'm almost not recognizing Georgia. But it's an amazing commentary and sad that we're even having a debate about Herschel Walker. I mean, I can't even, I'm almost speechless sometimes. When I watch his commercials, when he speaks, I'm almost speechless.
So is he.
Doesn't it remind you, CK, of Clarence Thomas?
Ooh.
It does. I think he's worse than Clarence Thomas in the sense that I recall Clarence Thomas being able to formulate a sentence. I'm not trying to be condescending or anything. Clarence Thomas could at least, now he was kind of, what he said was crazy, but he could formulate a sentence. You know, there was a subject, there's a verb, typically they agreed, and there was knowledge that it's necessary for them to agree when you're speaking, say, at a public forum. You know, if you're speaking in family, that's different, but when you're running for office, you know, sometimes it's important to know that. With Herschel Walker, some of the basics are lacking. More importantly, it makes him incredibly dangerous. Dennis, you've grown up in the football world. Santita, you have too. And I'm in it now. I'm knee deep in it because both my boys are are Division I. My youngest is headed Division I. My oldest is already in Division I playing football. This is a religion. It's a religion that transcends everything. And so it's that religion that is transcending everything is part of the momentum that he has. Because people are still seeing him run across the football field in their minds and taking Georgia to victory in their mind. And so he has the benefit of that religion following him, not to mention some of the deepest politics that exist in this country. But he is woefully inadequate as a candidate. He should not ever be representing the citizens of Georgia in any shape or form. I can't even believe that we're having this discussion. Let's then we haven't even talked about his disastrous personal disposition. And you hate to talk about people who have these dispositions. He's a known.
CK, that's where the parallel with Clarence Thomas comes in. We didn't care about his private life either. We didn't care that he was an inadequate jurist. He wasn't prepared for the Supreme Court. But what he was prepared to do was to be used as a tool of people who did not have black folks' best interest at heart. He was prepared to do that. And that's what he and Herschel have in common. Herschel has spent his life being used by white folk for their own ends.
And look at Clarence Thomas now. He's even drinking, believing his own Kool-Aid. I mean, if Clarence Thomas is the person who's going to literally ink the opinion, I predict this, he's going to ink the opinion to destroy affirmative action, to obliterate affirmative action. So in the case of, he's going to ink the opinion.
He hasn't been shy about that.
I mean, it's worse we could process decisions. But I do think there's a little bit of a distinction. I think that Clarence Thomas is probably one of the worst jurists we've seen on the U.S. Supreme Court. He did have the ability to formulate a sentence. Didn't agree with anything he said, but he had the ability to formulate a sentence. Herschel Walker, there's a question about that. I'm not quite sure if he does have that ability, which makes it just as dangerous, but even more dangerous because he's able to be manipulated more. And Georgia, again, is front center is going to make a difference in the balance of power in the U.S. Senate, I believe. It's going to make a difference in the balance of power in the South. What happens in Georgia will spill over to Florida to have impact on Alabama, South Carolina, all of those states. So Georgia is the focal point, and the fact that we've got two eminently qualified leaders that should win. Stacey Abrams almost won, but for the fraud, she would have won. And we always say, but for the fraud, Al Gore would have won. I mean, but for the fraud. And Raphael Warnock, there's just nothing more to say about that, but that is just sheer craziness. And, you know, craziness is such an easy word to throw around because it enables you to just say something without being articulate and specific. That's why I wanted to be articulate and specific. He's not qualified. He does not have the temperament to be that kind of a leader. This is not a terrain. This is not football field terrain. He is being used and abused and will be. It's in the worst of ways. He has a horrible personal history, and as Janice said, we don't care about that. On commercials every day, there's at least 5 times a day a commercial of a woman who's saying, "Yeah, well, he's beaten me upside the head. He did this."
About a minute before we go back.
He just is not the right person. He lies. It's one thing to lie as a political person. He lies about his record mercilessly. Well, I guess people figure so did Donald Trump that he was president. So
all these folks lie.
Imagine, doesn't he remind you of Donald Trump in his attitude toward women and his inability to articulate an idea? Absolutely. By his emotions and not by, aren't there some
30 seconds.
Okay, do we have Fancher on? Attorney Fancher?
Yes.
Okay, let me know. Always let me know, hon. All right, everybody, we're coming up. CK, legal Q&A with CK. And coming up there. Got that. Got that. Right.
15.
Thank you. Attorney Fancher, how you doing? Attorney Fancher?
Good morning.
Okay, hey. So sorry I reached out to everyone so late last night. I came home and did something I never should do. I sat down and fell out. I'm so tired.
We can change the world. We can change the world. Change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
And hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world. I am green.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Wednesday, September 22nd, 2022. Say goodbye to summer and hello to autumn. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio. All my brothers and sisters up there in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Hey, Dynamo Dave. Hey, Matt. Sending y'all much love. And Gary. And the Sound of Blackness and Reverend McAfee and Spike and oh my gosh, Chip and everybody at AM 950 radio. I send you all so much love. I have to get up there and see you guys now that we're kind of moving back into travel and all of that. So let's Dynamo Dave and Matt, reach out to me. Let me know how we can make that happen. So I'm Santita Jackson. I want to hear from you today. We're going to be talking about Georgia. Oh, Georgia is on my mind. And it should be, because they can turn the tide of the U.S. Senate. They can turn the tide in so many ways politically. They are the game changers. Everyone's looking at the Stacey Abrams, Brian Kemp race. Everyone's looking at the Raphael Warnock, Herschel Walker race, and they should. And let's talk about that. I guess this is what freedom looks like. You've got, an unqualified black person and a qualified black person vying for the seat, and they are locked in with each other. Why? Who are the billionaires behind Herschel Walker? Forbes did a wonderful piece that let you know that there are some very powerful and very moneyed people, forces, who are behind him. What do they want from him? What do they want from one who says, I'm not that bright? Are you serious right now? Yeah, they're very serious. Because you want a puppet. You want someone you can put your hand up their back and then manipulate them. So let's talk about that. 773-763-9278. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 79 degrees, partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 67 degrees, mostly sunny. Major League Baseball, we're winding down, going into October. Let's watch it, everybody. The Guardians 10, the White Sox 7, the Cubs 2, the Marlins 1, and the Twins were off and will be off tonight, everybody. The number of ultra-rich people in the world has hit an all-time high. At the same time, someone is dying from hunger every single day. Every 4 seconds, as the number of the ultra rich are reaching an all-time high. And no one discusses the ultra wealth of the royal family, the royal families of Europe, and the royal family of Great Britain, worth more than $33 trillion. They control 1/6 of the landmass on Earth. Wow. One person dies from hunger every 4 seconds in the world. This is 238 international and local charities from 75 countries signed an open letter noting that a staggering, quote, 345 million people are now experiencing acute hunger, a number that has more than doubled since 2019. Just 2 weeks of food billionaire wealth gains could fund anti-hunger efforts in East Africa, but what would that $33 trillion do if Great Britain returned just a portion of the wealth that they have taken from these countries? Yeah, that's my commentary. I think we need to look at that, everybody. Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced the immediate partial mobilization, as he put it, of Russian citizens in an escalation of Moscow's offensive in Ukraine and pledged to use all means to defend the country and its people. According to Russian officials, about 300,000 reservists will be called up as part of the mobilization. Hurricane Fiona has escalated into a Category 4 storm as if Hurricane Fiona has not done enough damage, everybody. Most of Puerto Rico is still without power. Remember, as if it should matter, but it does, this is America, everybody. Puerto Rico is the United States. They're not a state. They're a territory colony. That's what they are. In the United States Virgin Islands, because they got hit by Hurricane Maria too. Got to pay attention, everybody. Puerto Rico, Turks and Caicos, and the Dominican Republic now face a prolonged recovery process after devastating flooding and raging winds damaged critical water and power infrastructures, which were already weak. Migrants flown to Martha's Vineyard are suing Florida Governor DeSantis over the fraudulent scheme to get them on the planes and get them away from where they were. Lawyers representing these migrants who were recently flown to Martha's Vineyard filed a class action suit against Governor DeSantis, alleging Governor DeSantis and his state's transportation secretary perpetrated a fraudulent and discriminatory scheme. The suit, which was filed yesterday in Boston, said the legal asylum seekers, because they had the right to be asylum seekers here in the United States, who boarded 2 flights from Texas to the wealthy island resort, were told they would be sent to Washington, D.C. The filing further claims that in an effort to mislead the migrants, the asylum seekers, Florida officials manufactured, as they put it, an official-looking brochure listing fake benefits. Migrants were also offered incentives such as a $10 McDonald's gift card, everybody. The UN chief, which that opens today, is blasting the PR industry for spearheading big oil's propaganda machine as we are dealing with the real effects of climate change, everybody. Oh, those are just some of the headlines. And some of the good news is that Lula da Silva, who is up to become president of the great country of Brazil. He's up by 16 points against Bolsonaro. They've tried to do everything to Lula, the great union leader. They've tried to do everything to him. In fact, when he was running more than 10 years ago, he had Reverend Jesse Jackson come down and campaign for him, as he's been trying to awaken the Afro-Brazilian population. He's up by 16 points, and he is part of this wave of progressive leaders who are coming into power in South America. Good for him. Everybody, we're talking about power and freedom and liberty for you. We want you to have your economic freedom. Do you use your debit card? Well, you shouldn't. You need a credit card. You say, I don't have enough good credit. Well, that's why you need to call Team Hochberg. You need to call Team Hochberg so you can craft a plan and get a credit card and then another. And then not too many, but, you need to have credit. Do you want to purchase a new home, but you say, I don't have good credit? Or I just don't have a plan. I don't have enough money. I'm making some money, but I can't get a home. Yeah, you can. If you call Team Hogberg, you can. If you want to refinance your existing home, if you want to secure a VA loan, if you want to bring down this credit card debt, call Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or visit 56david.com. Tom and Sonia did that. They have 2 kids. They had 17 credit cards and $100,000 worth of debt on those credit cards. They said, we can't do this anymore. We will go broke trying to stay above water. So they called Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID. And Team Hochberg listened to everything they had to say in this free consultation. And then when they came back, they came together as a team, and they were able to help them to secure an FHA loan, pay off their 17 credit cards, and then bring down those payments by more than $2,800. That could be you. Don't be ashamed. A lot of people are dealing with a lot. It's hard out here. People are using their credit cards to buy groceries. It's a lot. And to pay all kinds of bills. Call Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, so that you can get on the road to financial freedom. Who, thankfully, Raphael Warnock, Senator Warnock, Reverend Dr. Warnock, Senator Warnock, and Herschel Walker, at least in this latest poll, in this later Atlanta Journal-Constitution poll, are deadlocked. But it's gone back and forth. It's been a rocky week, which is why I've been nervous all week, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, as you welcome Attorney Mark Fancher onto the show. And of course, you've been with your sister beloved and colleague, Janice Mathis, Attorney Janice Mathis, the Executive Director of the National Council of Negro Women. And of course, I encourage you to get Mark Fancher's book. It is a fantastic book. It's a fantastic book. Go on and let's make it a bestseller. We can do that. We can do that, everybody. And I want you to reach out and stay in touch with Robert Patillo throughout the week. Of course, he and CK have shows on WAOK. Of course, he is on from 1 to 4 on Sunday Eastern Standard Time. It is a great show. I love the callers. I love it all. And Attorney CK Hoffler, top in her time slot at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Tuesdays on WAOK. I have never heard CK. Legal Q&A with CK. That's what we got every Wednesday right here, right now. He said, I'm not that smart, CK. No, CK, be quiet. You're talking to the voters, talking to you. Just hush. He said, stop. He said, you told me I got to prepare, so I'm preparing. I'm reading the quote. I'm this country boy, I'm not that smart. And he's that preacher. He's a smart man, wears those nice suits. So he's going to show up there, embarrass me at the debate October the 14th. And I'm just waiting. I'll show up and I'm going to do my best. Now, there are 6 billionaires who are helping to bankroll this man who said, I'm not that smart. 6, Bernard Marcus. He has contributed $1.75 million. He is the owner of Home Depot. Dennis Washington, who derives his $6 billion wealth from construction and mining. He's donated $500,000. Charles Johnson, $100,000. He's from Money Management. Nelson Peltz, investor. He's contributed $100,000. Trevor and Jan Reese Jones, oil and gas, $100,000. Steve Wynn, the Vegas hotel owner, $100,000. Why do all these people have such an investment in supporting a man who says, I'm not that bright? CK, Legal Q&A with CK. These are my questions for you. And of course, you've got Attorney Janice Mathis and Attorney Mark Fancher. Take it away, CK.
Well, good morning again to everyone. Yeah, well, see, this will always go down in history as one of the more disgraceful races in Georgia when we analyze the senatorial race between Senator Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker, 2 African-American men. And the reason why I say we'll go down and it will be disgraceful when we analyze it is because we've really come full circle with how some people perceive democracy. So on the one hand, democracy should be that, yes, there would be an election for the Senate, one of the leadership in the state of Georgia, where anyone could run. And so here you have two black men. You have one eminently qualified senator who, even if even more liberal thinking Republicans feel that he's done a great job in Georgia, begrudgingly they'll admit that. But even if you take away the partisan politics, which is hard to do, and just look at the credentials and the ability of someone to deliver a message, there never really should be a Herschel Walker running for U.S. Senate in Georgia. There are many things that Herschel Walker can do, many things. But running as U.S. Senator and winning and being the senator from the state of Georgia should not be one. It's very sad because what we see is someone who is being manipulated by dollars, manipulated by a party. He is the chosen one of former President Donald Trump. We know that they have a relationship, but it's deeper than that. Georgia is at the center of what could happen in the midterm elections. Georgia, again, could give the Democrats the majority in the Senate. Georgia, again, would have, if Raphael Warnock is victorious and if Stacey Abrams is victorious, will have an impact on the South, the new South, without a question. So all eyes are on Georgia, and for those eyes that aren't on Georgia, they need to be on Georgia, because what happens in Georgia is going to have a national impact, without a question. So, I think that's how we frame the issues here, Santita, when we talk about Georgia politics. And all of the legal issues associated with the campaigns in Georgia, disenfranchised voters, these voter suppressive laws that are designed to prevent Black and brown people and young people, progressive people from voting, that are designed to stall, to make it uncomfortable, to challenge their vote. All of that is in play and in place here in Georgia. So for those who are in favor of these voter suppressive laws, who in all of those states that have pushed that agenda, they're watching Georgia because this is the most significant race right now where you'll see how it unfolds. So this is very important. The legal ramifications, there's still litigation surrounding disenfranchised voters in Georgia. There's a lot of litigation that we believe will ensue. There's going to be an election protection lawyers on standby for all of the litigation of the challenges to people's vote, their right to vote, to their ballot. There are going to be a lot of legal issues that we would anticipate. So I think that's a framework, and that's how we have to look at the upcoming elections here in Georgia, both the senatorial and the gubernatorial. So on our panel, Santita, we've got experts. Janice Mathis, my goodness. If there's one person who I would say, I didn't say one woman, I said one person who is without a doubt an expert, lived in Georgia, ran Rainbow Push in Georgia, phenomenal lawyer, media commentator as well, who can talk about what's going on in Georgia, who lived the experience, the transition, really, I believe it's Janice Mathis, attorney Janice Mathis, who has just really...
Ooh. Attorney Hoffman, well, you know Janice? Go for it.
I'm sorry, did you hear?
Oh, you went on mute, girl. It's okay.
I'm sorry. Janice Mathis, what did you say? What did you say? I said, a brilliant
She went so far over the top that her phone stopped working.
Ooh, that paranoia.
Beautiful comment. But, if this were not so important and tragic, it would be comical. Clarence Thomas is also from Georgia, from rural Georgia, a little town called Pinpoint, Georgia. And for him to be opposed to affirmative action, how do you find somebody from Pinpoint, Georgia, but for affirmative action? But that's a slightly different conversation. The wealthy backers who are backing Herschel Walker, I think, choose him because of his limitations, not in spite of them. They are well aware that he is inarticulate, uninformed about history, probably couldn't tell you anything about the workings of the United States Senate. But that's not why he was chosen. He was chosen because this articulate, calm, rational, learned scholar Raphael Warnock took the nation by surprise when he won. And so what do you combat that with? Your ordinary white guy is not going to prevail in a race against Raphael Warnock, given the demographics of Georgia now. So you go find somebody who looks black, but has a very weak identification with black identity. Herschel, from his earliest days when he was still a student in high school in Wrightsville, in a county with 8,000 whole people in it, no black elected officials in a town that was more than 50% black, the people rose up and decided they would protest. Herschel was not only on the football team and had signed with the University of Georgia at that time, he was president of the Beta Club. He was considered to be a model student. Would he participate in that demonstration? Would he serve as peacemaker? Would he do anything to support the aspirations of his people in that town? No. Said his parents told him, you don't represent black folk or white folk. You represent everybody. You don't have to identify. He's never been comfortable with the idea of being a leader for black people. And so he was chosen because of his limitations, I guess is what I want to say.
Oh, that's
the
so
fact
diplomatic.
that Warnock was black and learned is what made, they wouldn't be even supporting Herschel, except they need a black guy to go up against a black guy.
She's so diplomatic.
And then you look at his personal behavior. What Donald Trump has done better than anything is destroy whatever shreds of personal responsibility we expected from office holders. This guy grabs people by the crotch and rapes women in department stores and denigrates veterans and talks down to any and everybody. So there's no more standard for what it takes to be a politician anymore in your personal life. If there ever was, that's been demolished. So that Herschel is what we get. And then I'm going to stop talking after this, but our complicated relationship to power. Some black men, not all of them, but some black men, there's a lot of research that shows, don't respond to threats. They don't respond to, we might lose the right to vote, we might lose education benefits or whatever, health care. They respond to power. They identify with powerful figures like athletes. Think about, forget Herschel for a minute. Think about how we revere athletes in our culture. And here's this super athlete guy. And I never got to go to the University of Georgia, they might say. I didn't get a contract to sign with pro football. But here's somebody from my state who is no better educated than I am, who can get to the top of the heap because of his athletic ability. For some black men who have been trending a little bit more Republican anyway, because they identify with the hyper-masculinity of Donald Trump, some of them identify with that way of thinking about women and others. Say, here's a guy that fits the mold. It is sad, but it is what it is. And I think we have to say to our brothers, the way to power is through your vote. It's not this super masculine athlete, buck, breeder, all those stereotypes and tropes that we work so hard to dismantle.
You know what, CK? I can't wait to hear what Mark Fancher and Robert Patillo have to say on the other side of the break about that.
Absolutely. 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 Oh, Janice put it best, though. And, in my introduction that I was saying on mute, Janice, I was going to tell. And then I was wondering why you weren't speaking.
All them wonderful things.
I was, and I said that there's no better person. And I said not woman, but person out there to comment on.
I heard all that, CK. I want the recording because I'm going to put it on my Facebook page. I want the endorsement. That was lovely and untrue, but much appreciated.
Oh, please. It is true. And Janice, how can we hear you on the radio?
We're on 96.9 out of Greenville, South Carolina, every Sunday night at 7:30. We're sisters-in-law, real sisters, real lawyers, really good conversation.
We love that show. Stay right there, CK. I want to hear from Robert Patillo and Mark Fancher.
I do too. I do too. And Mark. Robert and Mark. Can't wait.
You all have a lot of
Brilliant
explaining to
mind.
do. 12% of black men vote for President Trump, and the numbers are rising. What's up with this? I mean, look, and I'm a defender, and I love my men. That having been said, you all are doing some things that are just not smart, crazy, even just nuts. Just hold your horses. We'll be back. Legal Q&A with CK Hoffler on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a minute. Look, he said, I'm just an old country boy. CK, this, Mark, Robert.
Yeah. And you know, and I have to tell you, whenever people say that, I've had the benefit of practicing with Willie Gary, one of the best trial lawyers of all time. And sometimes he will tell a jury as he's about to get $1 billion verdict, and I'm just an old country boy.
Oh.
And then he proceeds to give the most brilliant opening or closing that we've ever heard in the history of trial work.
Mm-hmm.
But
Wow.
Willie Gary Herschel Walker is not. Never can be, never will be, can't have no.
But your voice cracked.
It's just embarrassing. Embarrassing.
Your voice
and,
is cracking.
I think, in effect, my voice is cracking. I'm sorry. But I mean, I just can't help it. And there's a word that I heard someone say, and I love, people who make up words. There's nothing wrong with that. I have a family member who makes up words too. There's nothing wrong with that. But I would say that Mark and Robert have a lot of not explaining, but splainating to do. Have y'all heard the word splainate? Splainate?
Sounds like something my grandmother would have said.
Oh my gosh, and you would know exactly what she meant.
And I know exactly, and I'm not making fun when I say that because I use splainate for a purpose, for a reason. When there's a lot, it's beyond explanation. You have to go into a new zone. You have to explain it. And, that's how words get into Webster's dictionary.
Look, I knew my grandmama Tibby couldn't read or write, but I understood exactly what she meant. So, I ain't worried about that.
They're just sitting there listening to us. But I do look forward to their because this is something we have to discuss.
But the men are very quiet right
talked
now.
about it earlier.
CKV's men are
They're very quiet. But you remember? I haven't heard.
There's one other aspect of it too. Some black men don't want to live in a world where a woman can be governor.
Yeah. Well, and
there's a little bit of that too.
What Dwight McKee said that there's some black men that feel that the black women are congregating, have their own organizations, are rising to power, and they're left out. They're being left behind. And this is not an attack on black men. What we have to do is talk about these issues. I'm raising 2 black men. Talk about these issues so that we come together as a family of people, so that we don't have this kind of division because it's not needed. It's not necessary. It shouldn't be.
No.
And that we
and from so much of what black women do has in mind black men and the whole family. I mean, NCNW talks about family and community. Yeah, it's about black women, but it's not just about black women.
But you know what? If she's doing something,
clear.
But I'm hearing from a lot of black men who take umbrage with some of her strategies and with some of the people who she has working her campaign, running her campaign.
We got a minute.
Thank you so much. And if that needs to, do we have Chaparral on?
Yes, we do.
Okay, very good. If that needs to be, we need to discuss that too. And if that needs to be worked on, she needs to do that. Because one of the things we learned from Reverend with his 50 state plus territories campaign Okay, thank you. Just say 5 seconds, 10. That helps. Okay, very good.
Will do.
Okay, thanks so much. I knew you're just getting the rhythm of the show. It's all good. All right.
And here we go.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am green.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show, AM 950 radio in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. Calls at 773-763-9278. Let's talk about what's happening in Georgia. 6 billionaires are helping bankroll, Herschel Walker, his run for the Senate. I mean, they are putting some money behind him, but he said, look, don't expect a whole lot of me from this debate. Talking to the voters, talking to you. You told me I got to prepare, so I'm preparing. I'm this country boy. I'm not that smart. I've heard Bill Clinton and Reverend Jackson use that because they use that Southern accent, as does Janice, to their advantage. And then you find out that too, it's just some of the smartest people you will ever meet. I've heard Janice do it, and she lays it on thick, real thick. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Let me bring on, before we get back to legal Q&A with CK, someone we all love and adore and whose food we want. And I want my oxtails this weekend. Shapiro.
Good morning, Santita. Thank you so much for having me on. Yes, in Celebrations by Us, we are your one-stop party connection, and we do handle all of your food and decor. Yes, Santita, I'll be having your oxtails with rice and gravy and maybe some greens because I am making some, and we'll make sure we have you a nice Sunday dinner for you this week. So give us a call at 708-526-4546, 708-526-4546. Not only do we do food, but we do awesome decor as well, custom sweet tables, as well as custom treats, and our floral decor. So don't hesitate to give us a call at 708-526-4546. We look forward to serving you. Thank you so much, Santita.
Okay, Shapiro, you have 30 seconds to weigh in on this topic. Go.
Okay, my thing, Santita, is I hear what everybody's saying about Herschel Walker, and it is true. He is everything everybody is saying. But what is not resonating with the people of Georgia about Reverend Warnock? I mean, he has the credentials, he has the look, he has the sound. Why is he not translating? Why is that not translating into votes for him? And the thing is that we have to be able. He has to be able to have that crossover appeal to pull the moderate whites over as well, and we have to get those unregistered Black voters out. So something is happening in Georgia that they're not connecting with the people on the ground, and maybe because they are not actually on the ground. That could be the problem. And so I think that we have to peel back and stop. Let's focus on Herschel, but more focus on what Warnock could do to overcome this problem that he has right now.
CK Hoffa, you got it.
Well, we haven't heard from Robert Patillo and Mark Fancher. And I really, Janice posed a question, and it raised an issue. And this is an issue that we just need to discuss in our community, outside of our community, which is why are we in the context of Stacey Abrams' gubernatorial election? Why are we, or campaign, why are we not seeing African American men supporting her on the level that she needs in order to win? And there were a lot of issues that Janice raised, and we discussed this in our community, not because we are bashing Black men, much to the contrary. Much to the contrary. We love, support, as a family unit, Black men. So that's not what this is about. But we have to discuss these dynamics because there's a political race. And what can she do? So I think it's important to hear from, let's start with Robert Patillo and see what his perspective is. He's here in Georgia. He's with Rainbow Push. He's an extraordinary lawyer, political commentator, media personality, and he's in the trenches here in Georgia. So, Robert, what is your perspective on that issue?
Well, thanks so much, CK. And I've learned as someone who grew up with mothers, sisters, and aunts, and when black women are talking, to sit in the corner, be quiet until you're called on. So I do appreciate the opportunity. But about 6 months or so ago, I was on my friend Tucker Carlson's show on Fox, and they were talking about the Abrams race. And one of the things I said on there was that, well, the campaign's going to have issues if, one, they don't have more in the trenches Georgia consultants on the case. I actually named some men, women that can go into Houston County, that know the difference between Jordan High School and Jordan High School, that can go down to Montezuma and all the way up to Hart County and know how to campaign, because they were bringing in a lot of D.C. and L.A., New York political strategists. And then also I said they need to concentrate on actually talking to black men where they exist at, not in the small cadre rooms where, you know, I call them the Negroes in suits congregate. Get down there in the trenches, talk to brothers at the street, go down to the MARTA bus station and talk to a group of 17 to 18-year-olds, find out what their issues are and campaign to their issues. Don't tell them what their issues are. And I got called everything but a child of God. I mean, Santita remembers this. They were calling up to push. They were mad all across the board, saying that I was slandering Stacey Abrams by saying that. And here we are 6 months later, and literally everything that I said was exactly what they needed to do. The part of the problem is an inability to talk to people where they exist at, because sometimes those talking points don't coincide with what the donors' talking points are. Sometimes those campaign issues don't coincide with what the issues on the national level are. And because of this, there's a disconnect. I ask people all the time that if you were hypothetically at that bus stop in the middle of Southwest Atlanta or in the middle of Augusta, Georgia, talking to a group of 17 or 18-year-old young black men, trying to tell them to vote in the upcoming election, what will be your message to them? And is your message coming from them? Are you talking to them about the things that they want done? Or are you trying to regurgitate to them what you think they should care about? And this is what the issue is, because instead of them just simply coming along, they check out. And when you're looking at people like the Brian Kemp or Herschel Walker, because they have very much the same policy, just delivered in different ways, you have to look at the fact that they are being bankrolled by the billionaire class in this country. In 2017, when President Trump passed his tax cut, he went down to Mar-a-Lago and said, I just made you guys a lot of money. And if you look at the top 10 billionaires in the world, their net worth during the Trump administration, for example, Elon Musk started at $55 billion. He ended the Trump administration at $230 billion. Their net worth, not only, I think they added something like $1.6 trillion in worth as a result of that. So these people don't really care about policies. They care about tax cuts. They care about government subsidies. They care about ensuring that they have the type of supplicant senators in there and supplicant governors in there that will support the top 1%. And Herschel Walker is just a useful person in this apparatus, but they want to make sure they have a reliable person in there that when the next time it comes they need to steal the election, they can call him the same way they called Tommy Tupperville and know that they will have his support, because there won't be any type of constitutional scholar there that might stand up against them. The same reason they're running J.D. Vance in Ohio, same reason they're running Dr. Oz, who was selling bootleg diet pills 6 months ago in Pennsylvania, because they want to control these individuals. So the same way that you see President Trump going around this country every single weekend, rallying support, talking to his base, talking to his voters, and then you see the stuff that the voters talk about trickle up into national policy, we need to have the same thing on the other side of the aisle, so that the things that brothers are talking about on the street corners, talking about in the barbershop, talking about in their small groups, are no longer being put behind the interest of other groups. Because when we are on my radio show often, we hear black men talk about the fact that they don't hear their issues articulated in national politics. What we do remember is President Trump creating an entire council of black men that advised him. That was a cartoonist group. You know, you had Darrell Scott, you had Pastor Mark Burns, so on and so forth. But out of that came the quote-unquote Platinum Plan, which they said was an agenda for African-American men. You had the economic program for black men. You had the funding for HBCUs that came out of that. So when it came to 2020, President Trump, even disingenuously, was able to point point towards what he called tangible results that were specifically focused on black men, and that's why he ended up getting something like 15% of the black male vote. So it's not as if it's magic. It's standard politics. I think Democrats often want to have the ability to not campaign to black men at all, not hire black men at all, not have any of them working in the press department, writing talking points, writing speeches, not going to their neighborhoods, not talking about the issues that affect them, and then pop it up and say, well, why aren't you voting for me? Like, what's wrong? Like, what's the issue? I haven't done anything for you. I haven't talked to you. Why don't you want to just get in line behind us? And I think once the party apparatus learns that's a problem, which they generally only learned about 3 or 4 weeks before each election, then that's when they'll be able to turn those numbers around. But I would love to see a very clear, consecrated policy that isn't afraid by propping up and talking directly to black men that they'll scare off other groups. I think that's what will need to happen in order to turn those things around. Me and Santita did all 3 hours on my show together Sunday, and the biggest topic was reparations. That's something that they would like to hear about. If you're scared to talk about that, don't be mad when people aren't really lining up around the corner to vote for you.
CK, we haven't heard from Mark. I'm afraid.
You have every reason to be.
No, I'm not afraid because Mark always brings it home. So I'm not afraid. We want to hear from Mark. And I think, Robert, Santita's raising some great points. He did get a lot of flack because people were I got called as chair of Rainbow Push about his comments, and I went back and listened. While I didn't find them to be really the way that they were presented to me, I did understand why people were concerned because it gave the appearance on Fox that he was being critical of Stacey Abrams. And there is sensitivity in our community now, especially in Georgia, when black men get on television and say negative, what's perceived or could be interpreted, because the media is manipulating as negative. So I did understand that. There's a strong sensitivity that we must overcome in order for her to win. So I'd love to hear what Mark has to say about that.
Okay, duck, everybody. Just kidding.
Well, let me first say that I think that the analyses of my sister CK, Janice, brother Robert are brilliant and on point. And I think that the allusion to, especially with respect to black men, the fact that their analysis is very superficial is also right on point for many of them. I can't say all. But I want to expand it out, and I would suggest that the analysis of the black community generally very often is overly superficial. What we tend to do is we lapse into viewing electoral races, political races, as a sport. And it's a game that's being played with, on some level, a belief that if somehow the Democrats can capture, the seats that are necessary for them to dominate wherever it is that they're running, then we've won the victory. That's the ultimate goal, is to have the Democratic Party in control of things. And that's the way many people think. And that is the product of very superficial thinking, because the fact is that the Democratic Party needs to be destroyed, as does the Republican Party. Both of them are corporate parties, imperialist parties, parties that are enemies of not just African people in this country, but around the world, and all oppressed people. And they work against our interests at every level. And we refuse to accept that. Because we see the two-party system as the only game in town, and we play by the rules and think that we can win somehow by winning at this game, which has been rigged to ensure that we never get any place. And so when we lapse into that type of thinking, then we lose. And we engage in an analysis that lacks the depth that's necessary for us to achieve the type of liberation that we want. And not only that, we miss out on understanding the lessons of history and the fact that if we listen to those who back the Democratic and Republican parties, then what we do is we try to play to the middle. We try to be moderate. We try to appeal to all the voters with conventional kinds of, traditional kinds of messages, when that is a prescription for failure. If you look at Reverend Jesse Jackson's run back in 1984 in particular, you see an individual who threw the rule book out. He was not the product of a Democratic Party and conventional Democratic Party politics. This was a man who, when it was the worst thing to do, as for a Democratic politician, he went and he consorted with, talked with, expressed concern for the Cuban Revolution. He went to Nicaragua, met with the Sandinistas. He talked about the problems with corporate-controlled farms. He looked at apartheid at a time when it was still not acceptable to oppose it forcefully and vigorously, and he attacked it. He even did the unpardonable thing of actually expressing concern for the rights of Palestinians. And we could go on and on about the ways in which he completely broke out of that Democratic Party, plantation and began to lead in a new way. And you see the reaction that he got. He tapped into something that the masses of people are looking for, somebody who is as opposed to the political establishment as they are on some level, whether they're conscious or not. And it is successful. We see it right now in Michigan, where I live. Rashida Tlaib is the same, strident, revolutionary young woman that she was before she went to Congress. Many of us worked with her and knew her then. She's still the same person. She does not play by the rules. She says what she needs to say. And in the recent election, the candidates who came out against her listened to the advice of the Democratic traditionalists and said, well, this woman's crazy, this woman is wild, so what you should do is frame yourself, position yourself as a more traditional type of a person.
And they were black people.
A politician who's going to be polite and play the game.
Hold on. They were black people. Because I had a lot of friends in Detroit, and I was like, I can't support these people over Rashida. Rashida's a real progressive. What you talking about?
Exactly. And they got crushed. Rashida Tlaib won hands down against these types of people. And we don't learn that lesson. It is no problem. It is no crime. It is in the interest and in the service of our people to be revolutionary in whatever form we are, and to do it without fear and without concern. And we win when we do that, because ultimately, what we've got is unacceptable. And to the extent that Stacey Abrams is considered by many to be an establishment Democrat, somebody who's going to play the game, sure, she wins. But if she's going to just sit there and maintain the status quo, then what good is it? What good has been done other than to just sort of hold ground a little bit? And for most people, they're not looking to just hold ground. They're not just willing to just preserve what we've got. They're looking for liberation. They're looking for freedom. And we need people who are courageous enough, visionary enough, and prepared to do that before we can have the type of groundswell of support that I think most politicians are looking for.
Before we get some closing remarks from everybody, and if whoever can stay with me for about 5 minutes afterwards on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, please do. But CK has got to run to Court TV. CK, your closing thoughts.
Well, first of all, thank you for this brilliant panel. I think we have to talk about the issues. The only way to win, not be afraid of the issues, to address the issues between, the issues surrounding why some black men are not supporting Stacey Abrams. Let's just go right to it. We shouldn't be afraid of political season. In addition to that, we have to just look at what's happening in Georgia, in the state of Georgia, and recognize that Georgia is a microcosm of what's happening in this country. All eyes need to be on Georgia politically, and we need to watch very carefully what happens with the race of Senator Warnock and Herschel Walker. It's a travesty. It's sad. We may feel some kind of way, but I'm knee deep in it, and I'm telling you, we're running neck and neck, really running neck and neck. And Herschel Walker could win, and that would be devastating for the state of Georgia.
Sending you much love, everybody. Tune into Court TV in just a few minutes. That is where you can find C.K. Hoffler offering her brilliant legal analysis. You know what? I want you to stay with me just give me about 5 more minutes after we get off the air. And Ronnie James, stay right there. Go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Or you can stay on the Santita Jackson show Santita Jackson and Friends YouTube page, because he says that you're not really telling the Rashida story accurately. I wish you'd call in real quick, Ronnie, so we could speak to you, because I don't know if you'll be able to type it all out. It's easier to talk to people. 773-763-9278. But I'm going to get some closing thoughts from everybody here. Let me start with you, Robert Patillo. Is Robert still there?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I think this is kind of a capstone of what the disconnect that happens when you have the well-financed political parties with focus groups and all these the wonderful pollsters and stuff that don't get out there and talk to the people, that don't get out there and actually listen to the voters. Remember, the same way that President Trump does these big monster truck rallies every weekend for his candidates, Democrats could be doing the same. There's nothing stopping Barack Obama from doing a rally like that for Warnock or for Fetterman or for Ryan or for Mandela Barnes every weekend. They simply don't have the same connection with their voters. This is why it's so hard for them to shake that image of being coastal elitist who kind of descend down on their golden chariots to talk to the plebiscites every once in a while. They've got to get out of that and start talking to their voters that they want to vote for them.
Attorney Fancher.
No, I just, continue to believe that the worst thing that we can do is to have politician minds or to think like politicians and to play the game. We have to be guided by principles, our morality. And if we do that, then, God's got our back. He'll be with us. We'll come through as long as we're aiming for what's right. I mean, that's the kind of thing that drove the civil rights movement, drove principled people, like your dad, other people who were not looking at trying to play a game. They were trying to achieve what was right by whatever means were available and necessary.
Well, the theme of that campaign, as you well remember, Janice Mathis, of those campaigns was toward a just society and a more peaceful world. I could not have watched him risk his life, put on those bulletproof coats and vests as if they really protected you, because as the Secret Service honestly said to us, if someone wants to get you, they will. But and several people, many people ended up in jail because they did try, but they were stopped. That having been said, you do have to do the right thing. And I think that, as Mark says, God will have your back. But where do we go from here? Because we've got less than 50 days. And who knows how this debate will go. They might have a piece. I'm sure they'll have a piece in his ear, and he could just come out all guns blazing. like he is, I'm always wary of people who say I'm not that smart. I'm like, oh God, they're generally the smartest people in the room. Lord forgive me. Janice, you got the last 90 seconds. They belong to you.
Well, as I was thinking about what our dear friend, the commentator, Attorney Francis, said earlier about the Democratic Party, I could not help but juxtapose it against people like Fannie Lou Hamer and Jesse Jackson, and to a lesser extent, Andrew Young, when he confronted the Palestinian question, is that the architects of this Democratic Party came out of that revolutionary tradition. And I think we have to be careful. We ran the segregationists out of the Democratic Party and took it over and made it largely reflective of some progressive views. So while I believe in internationalism and think that we ought to be more insistent about principled policymaking, not sure the answer is to say that we give up on the party that, for all intents and purposes, we created. And I would just encourage everybody to study the issues and vote. Be vocal. And I want my friend Robert to tell me, he talked a lot about what black men want. I want a list. I want to see what is it that black men want.
Well, hold on. Janice, you're begging, I think, another show. And maybe we should, no, I'm very serious. Maybe we should do that tomorrow, because President Trump in 2016 got 12% of the black male vote.
Right.
And we got to be honest about the fact that our politics are lining up very differently now. More and more and more and more and more. I've talked to any number of black men who, I'm like, you could vote for Trump or you probably did. I mean, and I'm not mad at you. I just want to know where you're coming from. And I know black women who did too. And then I know some white folks who are hardcore Bernie folks. I mean, it's not as simple. You know what I mean? So it's like it's
not simple.
It's not simple. It's not black and white.
And the worst thing we can do among ourselves is to form a division, and it's already forming between black men and black women. Black women are desperate for the affection and esteem of black men. They may not act like it in ways that you recognize, but when I talk to my younger friends, what they want is a husband and a family and stability and
with you
connection and relationship.
Hold that thought. Hold that thought. I got a hard out. Then I'm with you. Because black women are less likely to marry outside the race than anybody. And you are more likely to marry outside the race than anybody. I ain't mad at nobody because love is love. I get it. That having been said, there's something that's going on here. We need to talk about it. Everybody stay with me on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Thank you. Love you, love you, love you. See you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. Okay, Janice, I want you to finish your point. I want you to finish your point.
There is a longing among black women for connection, for emotional, spiritual, physical connection. And they are mystified. Many of them grew up without fathers like yours and like mine who reassured them of their value. And they're yearning for this connection to black men, and they don't understand what they're doing wrong to keep from getting it. I'm not talking about everybody, but it is a phenomenon. You look at our college campuses, predominated by black women, black men absent. Everybody can't be a rapper and athlete. We've started to equate intellectualism with being feminist, and that's not true.
So the brothers are in prison.
What now?
Yeah.
Well, I think also on that point that I remember being on college campuses and still visit for to give speeches to young groups of black men, and they will tell you they feel that the women on campus aren't interested in them until way later on. That if you look on most college campuses on a Friday afternoon, there's a bunch of 30-year-old, 40-year-old dudes pulling up in BMWs picking up the college girls. And then, maybe later on when you're 30, 35, 40, they'll be interested in settling down. So I think there's a divergence in the way that we communicate as groups. The number one song of this summer on Black radio for the entire Gen Z and Gen Alpha generation was a song by this artist named Gorilla, and she's a female rapper out of Atlanta. And the song goes, "I'm FREEF N-word free," and that means. And then they have a pregnant girl twerking on a car in the video. But that was the number one song in the country for young people this summer. A song about being F Negro free for the summer. So I think that when we talk about these things, that there's both a generational divide, I think, and also a cultural divide, because there's very much a cottage industry of women making songs and movies and music and books and stage plays about how much they don't want black men, and then maybe a personal conceptualization of wanting and that longing for black men, or maybe they just all want the same black men. Maybe it's just Idris that everybody is looking for, and if we can clone him a few times, it'll take some of these problems out. But I think when it comes to an agenda, like an actual political agenda for black men, it's not particularly complicated. One is going to be economic. If we just stick to an economic message where we talk about what can benefit African American men, we saw this with Trump when he talked about the Platinum Plan, getting a hold of some governmental contracting, getting a hold of job placement programs, access to small business loans, programs that will end gentrification and put money in their pockets. If they just simply concentrated on that,
that will be literally 50% of the problem. I think that often we start with this concept of criminal justice reform, but that doesn't impact as much of the black men as people think. I think when we talk about economics, rebuilding families, opportunities, those sorts of things, I think you get people back on board. But because no one comes in and talks to folks on that level, and because often those conversations are inconvenient to other parts of the big tent that Democrats are trying to build, that ends up being lost until it can become something pop culturist. Because at the end of the day, politics is the question of who gets what when. And when you're making those value assessments, often black men end up at the bottom of that totem pole.
Yeah, see, I think that, we really underestimate the extent to which there has been cultural warfare against our community. And I don't spend too much time trying to figure out what we're doing wrong, because we're the product of some very intense, nefarious external forces, that have had a real impact, a heavy impact on even the way that we think. Through popular culture and other things, especially, black men have not, it's not that they have their issues that they want to see addressed or that they have a political agenda. They don't have one, period, because there is a glorification, a glamorization of being an idiot. There are people who aspire to not think, to not go to school, at best, maybe to achieve in the entertainment or sports arenas, but that's what they've been trained to do. That's the way they've been trained to think. It is not something that they think. Having a political analysis or thinking is not something that they do or want to do. So if you ask them what they want, they don't know because they haven't thought about it. And, in terms of their viewpoints and ideas and perspectives on black women, all you got to do is look at hip hop videos and other things. We don't control that stuff. That's controlled by white corporate executives who have a vision, an idea of what our people are, who our people are, and what they want them to be. And they project all of that into the products that they release. If you're an artist who wants to present a different reality, present something that's more accurate about our community, your project is not going to get green-lighted by corporate executives who have in their own heads what they want. They want, women who look like prostitutes and act like them to be the heroes. They want thugs and gangsters to be the role models for our community. And they control the money, they control the cultural scene, and they're the ones that present those images, and our children gobble it up just like candy, and they internalize it, and they become it. So we're dealing with a war that's being waged against our people at every level. And the more time that we spend trying to figure out what we're doing wrong, the less time we're spending trying to analyze how to take these people out. Because, I'm personally, very angry about what's been done to, one of the most beautiful black communities on the planet.
Well,
and just kind of piggybacking on Mark's point, if you look at Generation Z, millennials, the women that are considered to be the kind of most beautiful women, the Beyoncés, the Rihannas, the Cardi B's, the Nicki Minaj's, etc., who are they all dating? Rappers. If you look at like being the most successful black women in sports and in media and entertainment, who are they dating? Wealthy white men. So when you're looking at the young black boy who's 17 or 18 who wants to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, the message is being pushed to him is that, well, if you want a professional or successful woman, she's going to be with the wealthy white man because that can better promote her career. And if you want kind of the gorgeous, beautiful video vixen model type woman, she's going to be with a rapper or a drug dealer or an athlete. So where exactly is the lane for you if that's what you're looking for? If that's what your mind as a 17 or 18-year-old is dictated towards. And I've seen many clients that I had back in the day when I did day-to-day courtroom work, where they would be from middle-class families. They would be in the Kappa League and etc. And that's they went and joined the Bloods because they were trying to impress a girl, or they went and took part in a robbery because they thought that would get them more attention, the attention they were looking for. So as Mark said, there's a sickness to what is being presented in our community, particularly for the quote unquote nerdy black boys, that there's not really a causeway, there's not really a pathway to the success that you're looking for, and that's what's being pushed and promoted in the community. You have a few options. None of them are good. If you want to date Beyonce, you better do like Jay-Z, sell kilos of coke. And I'm guessing I can sell CDs, and that's the mindset many have.
Yeah, and a concrete example of it is what we've been talking about this morning. Let's say hypothetically that Herschel Walker wins the race. All right? You know, wealthy white right-wing business people would have been responsible for that. But the end product is a man who stands up as a black man and as a former athlete and says, "I'm an idiot." Now, that's who any young black boy who may aspire to politics is going to have as his role model now. You know, if I want to succeed, I got to be dumb as a rock. I mean, this is not accidental. I mean, they do these things, and we just fall into that trap, and it's very, very concerning on so many levels.
Janice, you still there?
Yeah, I have to go, though, but I think it's time for a candid, heart-to-heart conversation among our folk about our values, about the value we put on materialism, material accomplishment, and think about what is in our community's long-term best interest. The thing that we had going for us when we didn't have freedom, we didn't have the vote, we had a certain degree of unity of purpose. And I think it's time for us to at least make the effort to rediscover what we have in common as Black folk and not be so quick on either side to denigrate the other. We need each other.
Well, amen to that.
Amen to that.
I'm here for that conversation. I really am. I mean, because
and I think Santita Jackson shows the ideal place to have that conversation.
Well, I'm here for it. As long as all of you are there, because you make the conversation go.
The best thing that's happened to me this summer is a young friend of mine who, I sort of encouraged to finish his education, sent me a copy of his degree in business administration. I celebrated and shouted hallelujah. If a couple $100 a month would help him get his degree and launch a path toward his future, coming out of a very deprived and unfortunate background, that's something to celebrate, and that's something we can replicate too.
Absolutely. And we do need to have some heart-to-heart conversations, and I think that what's happening with Stacey Abrams can help to kick that off. Charles Blow wrote a really wonderful op-ed piece about the Democrats' black male voter problem, and I think that's something we need to talk about. We need to talk about it. I mean, I think that sexism and misogyny is part of it, but there's always been a push for black men and black women to be apart. First of all, it was illegal for us to marry. Okay, so we've got to deal with that. But somehow or another, we pushed on through. But as we have become more corporatized, that is to say, the record industry has tremendous sway. You see, we talked earlier this week about the FBI spying on, surveilling, not just spying on, but surveilling and being a part of Aretha Franklin's life. Aretha Franklin, whose father was the biggest black preacher in America, who was free, who didn't need the record industry for her money. So, there's something to be said for that. There's something to be said for having Stax Records and Motown and Buddha, which were black-owned, particularly Motown and Stax. They were black-owned companies. And Curtis Mayfield's record label, they would not use the N-word. They would only, Ebony and Jet these were black-owned companies that would only project the best of us while exploring our challenges and looking for solutions to them. And we have to deal with that. Because now we don't have black-owned record companies. You have black-faced record companies that are funded by people who have us using the N-word and who have turned black women into whores. And it's just a shame before God. Black women have had to fight for our virtue in America. Black men have never had rights that white men would respect. Black women have never had the virtue. I can go to Africa right now. Everybody on this panel can, and you are not African. They call you mixed race. They call you colored. This guy, this man, bless his heart, this weekend, we were honoring some Africans at Push. And, they were introducing them. We were introducing ourselves in one of the holding rooms at Push. And this gentleman said, I'm Nigerian. I'm from Nigeria. I said, and I'm African American. It's good to meet you. He said, I thought you were Mexican. I said, you're not serious right now. Really? Well, but I said, do you know this? I said, that's what 400 years will do to you. Okay.
That's exactly right.
No, because I was ready for that. Don't come at me with, I hear you, but what do you think we've been over here playing tiddlywinks?
Back to Herschel.
Yeah.
It goes right back to Herschel Walker. We value him for his ability to run fast and hit hard, not for what he might think. And generations of that create an expectation that you excel in entertainment, not in intellectual pursuit.
But
too many of our young folks, male and female, have bought into that trope. But
but there's entertainment and there's entertainment. Roberta Flack was singing at Mr. Henry's at night in DC while she was teaching school during the day and getting her PhD. She got a full scholarship to Howard at 13. Her parents let her wait until they said, no, you must wait till you're 15 you're not mature enough to be in college at 13. We have a history of Paul Robeson, of people who were intellectually and artistically gifted and developed in all these areas. And we have to get back to that. Memorizing music ain't easy. Staying in tune ain't easy. Being an athlete, on a high level is not an easy thing.
It's not easy.
It's not easy. It's hard. It's hard work. They send these football players home with thick binders of plays that they must memorize. That after they've memorized them, then they have to on a moment's notice recall what they read and put it into action. That's why these people, they're paid a lot of money for a whole lot of reasons. So I want us to use the Stacey Abrams race, I think, as a jumping off point, Janice and Mark and Robert, because that's a biggie. That's a biggie. Because
I'm here for that conversation.
Oh yeah, you hear me. You'll hear me later.
Yeah, I have to sign off as well.
Well, I love you all, and I thank you for that. But I thank you for yet another idea. I love y'all, and thank y'all for taking my text in the middle of the night. I came home and I sat down on the sofa, which is something I should never do because I generally keep on going. I don't sit when I come home because if I sit after 3 hours of sleep at night, I'm knocked out. And I was knocked out and woke up and was horrified. I said, I don't even have a guest. But you all responded in the middle of the night. And I want to thank you, my dear family. I love you. I love you, Mark. I love you, Robert. I love you, Janice. I love you, CK, as you're on Court TV right now. I love you. I love you, Morning Stars. Miss Robinson, cuckoo, happy birthday, girl. Oh, happy birthday. Happy birthday. Sending you much, much, much love. So I love all of you, and everybody have a great, great, great day. And God bless you. And tell somebody you love that you love them and mean it. That's from my Aunt Irene. May she rest in heavenly peace. Love everybody. God bless.